There are other different types of dementia, and depending upon where the difficulties lie, that in the illness determines the course of treatment.
You can. All you have to do is want to do it.
Yes.
Want to be it.
Can you set your mind to it? And this is who you are, and
the grown men. We have the youth that we need to mentor, and we need to inspire, and we need to motivate. But I know, as a recent conversation between you and I, that you're also in the business of motivating grown men. Through that, I'm supposed to see God in it at every turn. So me going to the Sea of Galilee was to remind me of that, to refresh myself of that. It is all under control, that He does have it. It's just as clear as that fresh water that I saw.
You're Our Unity, hosted by LeShawn Walker, Tuesday nights, 6 p.m. PST.
Welcome, everyone, to You're Our Unity, a show that wishes to spread a spirit of peace and love in the world, one conversation at a time. We want to encourage you to get involved with a cause, a focus, maybe even an organization or a belief that is so important to you and the future of your children and the next generation. How about you become part of the conversation, contribute in some form or fashion to the change that you're expecting so that your children can have a better future. I am your host, LeShawn Walker. I'd like to welcome you in. Please like, share, and follow. Let everyone know that we're on right now. I hope you guys had a wonderful week. It's kind of chilly outside. I feel fall just fast approaching. I kind of like it. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't particularly care for the heat too much, so I kind of am enjoying the nice breeze outside. Not too cold and not too hot. So I hope that you guys have been out there enjoying it as well. You know, last week I've been sharing with you for the last couple of weeks of September. I've been so busy planning so many events and galas, and I just had one that I was part of this past Saturday. So before we go any further into the conversation, I want to share this week's Unity in the Community. So I attended the Thoughts Magazine Men's Day event. It was awesome. If you want more pictures, because I only have a few for you today, but if you want to see it, please follow me at You're Our Unity on Instagram and Facebook, and you'll see everything. But Nija Howard, the founder of Young Men Strong, put on an amazing event. I was around so many strong, powerful men of color, and what they were doing was basically sharing their stories. They spoke about the struggles that they've gone through and how they've overcome the challenges. She's all about pouring into these young men. So please, I'd like to show a few pictures of everything that we did. I have my friend that was actually honored as well, Mr. Sheffick. He won an award and a citation for all that he's doing in the community. This Young Men Strong project, which is so dear to Nija's heart, is all about empowering the young men of color in this world, changing the narrative, making sure that they're being highlighted, the fact that they have overcome so many challenges and that they're being successful in their path to becoming great kings in this world. So I was honored to be at the event. It was so amazing. My friend Sheffick, as I mentioned, won an award. I don't know if I have a picture with him and I, but he's an amazing guy that contributes in every way that he possibly can. And I'm so grateful that I was able to be a part of that spectacular event. So I advise you guys, next year, you need to be a part of it. I've been sharing it with you for a couple of weeks now. If you missed it, I am so sorry, but it was awesome. So next year, please try to become a part of this amazing organization, and somehow or some way follow them now. It's Thoughts Magazine and Nija Howard from Young Men Strong. And you know, this weekend, Saturday the 23rd, I am hosting the Defining You Life Fitness Center Season of Soul. We're going to have some speakers, some amazing speakers who've also been friends and guests of the Your Unity show, who are going to teach us how to stay lit through the darkness. The fall season is coming, and we need to maintain our self-care and self-love and that fire and that passion for fulfilling our dreams and our goals for the remainder of the year. So we're going to have some shopping, we're going to have some food. So I hope that you guys are able to attend. It's going to be spectacular. It starts at 3. Again, it is the Season of Soul Symposium. The information is there. So, you know, I'm all about, you know, the change and what we need to progress as a people. And Nyjah Howard proved that she is also part of that trajectory of trying to make sure that we're living in a better place of fulfilled humanity among our brothers and sisters of all colors, all races, all cultures, and all economic backgrounds. So we're going to speak to someone else today who is also about that change, about progressing our people, for mankind, for humanity, the moral just love that we should have within ourselves to make sure that everyone in this world is well cared for and make sure that everyone in this world is living exactly how God created us to be, equal and happy and fulfilled, kindness in everyone's heart. I want to share with you this amazing gentleman who has seen so many things in his life and has become part of the change that he thinks that this world needs. So we're going to speak to him today, and his name is Mr. Michael Zweig. The title of the show is Intergenerational Justice. Michael Zweig is an author, activist, and the founding director of the Center for Study of Working Class Life and emeritus professor of economics at the State University of New York at Stony Brook, where he received the SUNY Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Teaching. He is a member of the New York State Coordinating Committee of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, an elected member of the Executive Board of United University Professions. Michael is the author of The Working Class Majority, America's Best Kept Secret, and Religion and Economic Justice. His new book, Class, Race, and Gender, Challenging the Injuries and the Divisions of Capitalism, is a book for anyone interested in learning about, thinking more deeply about, or engaging in progressive politics. For Michael, anything that relieves human suffering is progress. Anything that improves the material conditions, organizational strength, or intellectual capacity of the working class qualifies as progress. Analysis or activity that moves society in these directions is what defines progressive politics in his eyes. He is here to share his journey for justice. Please help me welcome Mr. Michael Zweig. How are you?
Hi there, good to be with you.
It is so great to be with you, my friend. Again, so much to dig into, so much that you've accomplished in your life. So I am so happy that you found the time to be here with me today, and our guest as well. So how was your day?
Well, getting by, here I am. That's
right.
good, yeah.
Aw.
So glad to be here.
Oh, that's wonderful. So we're going to dig right in. I would like you to tell me, because I always ask my guests before, we dig into the real subject, the meat of the conversation, to tell us a little about your background.
Well, I'm a child of immigrants. My parents and my brother came to America to escape the Nazis, got out just in time. I was born in Detroit. I grew up in Detroit when it was the Motor City capital of the world.
Wow.
And we actually built cars and had machine shops everywhere and metal shops, and we knew how to build things.
Wow.
And it was a city of the auto workers, the UAW, and the Teamsters. And I grew up in that environment. I grew up, English is not my first language.
Oh, really?
I spoke German.
Okay. How was that?
Well, when you come to the streets of Detroit in 1946, it's not a good time to be speaking German. I can tell you that.
I could imagine.
So I learned English pretty quick out on the street.
Okay.
And,
Wow.
And then, of course, in school. And, I grew up, it's a great city to grow up in. There was a lot going on, and I would get on my bicycle and ride all around town and just check things out and keep my eyes open.
Wow.
And then when I was 13, in 1955, that's when Emmett Till was murdered. And I saw the pictures because his mother was so brave to have that open casket funeral. And the picture was in Ebony, and it was in other places, and I saw it.
Right.
And I was just so shocked because he was 14 and I was 13.
Oh, wow.
And my mother particularly had told me of the Holocaust and of the Nazis and our family who were all murdered, and I had all kinds of people in my family who couldn't get out.
Right.
And my mother made sure that I understood that, and my brother, that we understood that history.
Right.
And how people could be tortured and people could be murdered just for who they were.
Wow.
And then they came to America
Right,
to
right.
escape that.
Were they still scarred,
Oh, very much.
They were, yeah.
Oh, very much.
Even while trying to teach you and show you and your brother, a better life.
That's
and a,
right.
Yeah.
That's
wow.
right. But they carried that very much.
Right.
And I grew up with that. And when I saw Emmett Till, I thought, it's here.
Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't get away from it.
Yeah.
And I have to do something to make sure that we put a stop to that here.
Wow. Even at that young age.
Yeah, that's when I decided this has to stop. We can't have this.
Wow, that is amazing. It seems to me like that was kind of engraved in your DNA, that you weren't going to stand for it if you saw it, just like your parents, obviously.
Right. Well, after the World War II was over,
Right.
And you could get gasoline, it was possible to travel.
Right.
And so my dad would clock out, and he'd have 2 weeks before he'd have to clock back in. And in those 2 weeks, we would go someplace, get in the car and see America.
Travel, really?
And they, of course, wanted to see the country they'd come to.
Right.
And they wanted me and my brother to appreciate where we were.
Right.
And so my brother and I would always look at a map before, where are we going? Where can we go? And we would point to different places on the map of the United States.
Right.
And if we would point to South Carolina, my parents would say, we're not going there.
Oh, wow.
If I would point to Mississippi, we're not going there. Well, we can't go there because if we're there, we're going to have to say if we're white or colored in order to get a drink of water.
Wow.
And we will not say whether we're white or colored. That's not a question that we will accept.
Yes, I love that.
And that is what then brought us, then to Emmett Till and all this understanding that we just simply cannot have this racial oppression in the United States.
Yeah.
At the same time, growing up in a labor city where you have to have a union.
Yeah.
So what's the union movement? What's the labor movement? What's the workers' movement?
Right.
And how does that relate and interact with the Black freedom movement?
Racial, yeah.
And what's the contradictions there? And how does that work? And how has it not worked? And where has it worked?
Right.
And all those kinds of questions were things that I was struggling with and working through when I was growing up.
So, I know you mentioned, obviously you saw Emmett Till and that struck a chord within you that, you weren't going to stand for that happening and you wanted to do whatever you needed to do to ensure that it didn't happen again.
Right.
But were you still living, and I know it was further south, but weren't you still living in that sort of environment of?
Well, I was living in Detroit.
Yeah, but
Detroit, it is a northern city.
Right.
But it was a city in which there were all these auto plants that had a labor force that would come from the South, black and white.
Okay.
So in public school, I learned the Star Spangled Banner, of course.
Right.
But I also learned Dixie.
Wow.
You had to sing Dixie.
Okay.
I learned that it was the Battle of Manassas Junction,
Okay.
or it's the Battle of Bull Run,
Right.
depending on if you're a Reb or you're a Yank.
Okay.
Those things, and we learned that.
Right.
And we learned that, in a sense, out of respect for the Confederacy, because that whole racial question was still there.
Yep, still existed.
And so I grew up with all of that around me. And of course, Detroit had very, very troublesome racial relations.
Yeah.
I don't remember it in 1943, but there was a big race war in Detroit. My brother remembers it. And he says what he remembers is what terror looks like on people's faces.
Oh my goodness.
And that's Detroit.
Yeah, no, I
So, I grew up in that environment with a lot of racism around me,
Yeah.
and a lot of anti-racism around me. A lot of white people who were dedicated, particularly in the UAW and in the labor movement, to putting a stop to that.
That's what I was going to ask you. So, did you go to? Was your school segregated?
No,
Were you,
it was an
okay,
integrated school.
Great, good.
It was an integrated
So
school.
you did have friends who were.
I had friends who
other
were black
national-
and white. Oh, yeah.
Excellent. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay, so you understood. Even though, you know, all of this was going on around you and the injustices were happening in front of you right on television, you're watching the news, you still, as well as your parents, just in your heart, was, you know, not racist people, embraced everyone, developed relationships with other diverse cultures.
That's right.
That's amazing. So let me ask you, in terms of now you're getting into your teenage years.
Right.
And was it getting harder for you now? You're forging, you know, you're standing up for your beliefs. How was that time?
Well, it was a little hard.
Really?
Yeah, because, you know, you run into, see, in a white society, people have to learn that they're white.
Yeah.
And if you step out, if you're white, so-called white, and you step out of that, then people are saying, well, what the hell's the matter with you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like in the 10th grade, I was walking down the hall, and kids are pointing, you know, at, you know, ha-ha and all that. And somebody said, well, you got a sign on your back. You know, somebody, you know, with tape put a
Right.
sign on your back. So I reached in, there it was there, and I looked at it, it says nigger lover. So I said, well, that's right. I put it back on my back and walked through school. Nobody gave me any trouble about that.
Wow.
But, you know, that's,
so
and
how
that was in the suburbs. That was not in the city. That was because my parents moved out into the suburbs in order for me to go to a better high school.
Right.
And I went to a terrific high school. Bloomfield Hills High School was, I mean, really, I got a super education, public school.
Right. But how did you feel about that moment? I mean, I need to know how you felt about having this on your back and then reading it. And mind you, knowing who your core and what your beliefs
Yeah, well,
were.
like I said, I put it back on.
You just put it back on and you kept moving.
That's it.
So how was,
Doesn't bother me.
yeah, well
Except it did.
yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. And then to have these people obviously ostracizing you. You have
Well,
to go
some.
to school with them.
Well, some
okay.
and some didn't.
Okay, all
Right,
right.
so
So you
you-
found your tribe. You found your...
Not exactly, but enough.
Okay, enough. Okay, all right.
But, you know, I also maintained my friends from Detroit.
Good.
And I, you know, had my family for orientation.
Wow.
And
So were you out there as an advocate and an activist? Were you in, you know, these fights when they were out protesting?
Well, that came after I was in high school.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, because the sit-in movement
Okay.
started in February 1st, 1960.
Okay.
In Greensboro, North Carolina, where those 4 black students sat down in the Woolworths. And when I got to Ann Arbor, I was a freshman in September
Okay.
1960.
Right.
And there was a Woolworths in Ann Arbor, and there was a picket line going around the Woolworths in Ann Arbor. And I, you know, you come from Detroit, you know what a picket line is.
Yes, you do.
You don't cross a picket line is number one.
That's right.
And number 2, you check it out.
Right.
What is this about?
Right.
And that's where I learned about the sit-ins. That's where I learned about what was happening in that resistance. And then I had to decide, am I going to get on this picket line or not?
Wow.
Now, I had an uncle and aunt who lived in Ann Arbor.
Right.
And I sort of had to think, well, what if they see me on this picket line? What am I going to say if they ask me, what am I doing there? Can I defend this?
Right.
Can I explain this?
Right.
And I thought, yes, I think I can.
And how would
And
you...
I got on that picket line.
I love that. So tell me how, you know, knowing that you actually thought about that.
Oh, yeah.
How would you have, and what would you have said had they questioned you? What was your defense?
What I did say, and you know, because it wasn't hostile, but it was, what are you doing? And you know, and I'm doing this, and this is what I'm doing as a freshman.
Right.
You know, they want to know. My parents want to know. Oh, you're in college. What's it like? Blah blah blah. And I just said, well, you know, this is to do away with segregation,
Good.
to stop segregation, and I'm for it.
Yeah. Wow.
And they said, that's good, that's fine.
Where were you getting, your education and your drive for that fight? I know that it's appalling to see, obviously, it's horrendous and it's inhumane, but you also have to be educated, So where were you finding that education? Because I'm sure you weren't learning it necessarily.
I was
in
not
school.
learning it in school.
Yeah.
I was learning Dixie in school.
Yeah. Okay.
But, well, I read W.E.B. Du Bois. I read Black Reconstruction,
Okay.
and I was impressed. And I listened to what people were saying. I listened to what those kids were saying in North Carolina.
Wow.
And in Ann Arbor, we didn't have a core chapter, Congress of Racial Equality.
Okay.
So I, with a friend and a couple other people, we put together a core chapter in Ann Arbor.
Wow.
And of course that led to studies, and I was involved with the early days of Students for a Democratic Society, SDS.
Okay.
And we had a lot of study groups.
Wow.
We didn't rely on what was happening in the classroom. We had our own studies.
Yes.
And we read history, and we read contemporary sociology and political science and politics, and we just took on what's happening.
I love it. And finding your core followers in the midst of that as well, right?
Yeah, well, not even followers, but a crew.
Those that, a crew.
Don't
a
go
crew.
out.
That's
Don't
right.
don't go out without a crew.
I know that's right. Oh my God! You said don't go out without a crew, and you're absolutely right,
That's
my
it.
friend. You had your backers.
That's it.
I love that.
That's
so
it.
now you've created these groups, and I'm sure that you're making these small changes in your crew within your area.
Yeah.
So tell me about what. Even at that time, what you were hoping to accomplish and achieve.
Well, that changed over time, of course, as I grew and learned more.
Yes.
When I was, I guess, a junior, I had a couple of friends who, together, we thought, well, we're going to get PhDs. We were undergraduates, but we're going to get PhDs. And why don't we do it this way? Why don't we have one guy was in philosophy, another guy was in political science, and I was going to do economics.
Okay.
So we were going to pick some problem like world peace or racism, and we were going to do dissertations in our disciplines on that question.
Right.
So then we would all understand the depths of the knowledge
And
that you
how
could get
they
and put it all together, and we could solve the problem.
Right.
Well, it's not so simple to solve the problem with 3 different dissertations, and that all fell apart.
At least you attempted,
I
though.
tried, we were thinking about it.
You did.
We were
you
thinking
did.
about it. And then I got involved with a faculty member in Ann Arbor, Kenneth Boulding, who had a center for conflict resolution and building peace. He was a Quaker, very, very active and dedicated Quaker. And he and his wife, Elise Boulding, had this Center for Conflict Resolution in Ann Arbor. And he got me interested in the idea of a world university because the Peace Corps, right? I was in Ann Arbor when President Kennedy, then just a candidate, came and announced his plan for a Peace Corps.
Okay.
And that was pretty exciting. Let's have a Peace Corps. And gradually, as I understood more about the U.S. role in the world, and what I came to understand is imperialism and colonialism and all that, which I didn't understand or know those terms then.
At the time, right.
I thought, well, why do we have a Peace Corps that's just the U.S.? Why don't we have candidates or Peace Corps people from all over the world trained not just in the United States by an American university, but by a world university that has faculty from all over the world, students from all over the world, and then those students who are trained from all over the world go out all over the world, right?
Exactly.
To build democracy and unity
and peace. Exactly. Yes.
So I wrote this book called The Idea of a World University.
Oh, wow.
I went to Europe and I did research in the UN archives in Paris and Geneva, and I wrote this book between my junior and senior year.
Right.
And it got published. Harold There was the president of
Harold
Taylor.
Okay.
Was the president of Sarah Lawrence.
Okay.
He got it published at Southern Illinois University Press.
Wow.
My father had a book club that he was part of. And he invited me to come and speak to his book club about his son, his book, blah, blah,
Right.
blah. Well, between 1964, when I wrote that book, and 1967, when it came out, my understanding expanded a bit.
Did it?
Because there was all this war in Vietnam,
Very
and then we
true.
had to deal with that.
Yeah, okay.
What is the U.S. doing there? And we really studied and read all about the history of colonialism and the French, and then the Japanese, and then the French again, and then the Americans, and what that whole story was.
Right.
And I came to the conclusion that a world university really was a very naive thought.
And why? Why? I mean, I know the changes in the evolution of situations and problems in the world, but why did you still not think, even at that time, a world university?
Well,
would
because
be-
what's a world university going to do to stop U.S. imperialism in Vietnam?
come together to
Ho Chi
figure out.
Minh is going to
Yeah,
stop the U.S. in Vietnam.
Okay.
General Giap is going to stop U.S.
I
imperialism.
know, but that's what
the
I'm saying.
Vietnamese
World
people.
University is to train, to educate these
Okay, well,
different.
we'll stick around for that. But
Okay.
meanwhile-
Okay, I'm just thinking on the broader, but I
Yeah,
get what
but-
you're saying.
But meanwhile,
Yeah.
let's get down to what's actually going on.
What's
and
happening,
what
yeah.
what does it really take?
Right.
And in that way, I I learned. You ask, what was I thinking about, and how
Right.
was I developing in that period? And was a very profound thing. And when I came to that book club, I basically denounced my own book. Wow. And my father was not happy. I didn't denounce
Stop
it.
the presses!
I said, this was what I was thinking then, and it's a
Yeah.
good idea. But
Right.
actually, when you really come down to think about it,
Right.
that isn't going to really do the trick.
Right.
So it's not like I denounced the book, but I tried to
Yeah, just-
explain
it just-
the development of my thinking.
That's what I was gonna say.
That you really have to understand the economic and social system that we have here, and whatever you might think about it as an individual, or however much you might train one person or 5 people, if you don't have organized opposition that's deep and profound and widespread,
Right.
you're not going to defeat this monster.
Yes, that is.
And that is what I was coming to understand in the civil rights movement,
Right.
in the Black freedom movement, and also in the peace movement.
Right.
And how did those things interact with the labor movement hanging around in all of this too, and playing its role.
Right.
So those were the kind of threads that were informing my development.
Well, that was my question too, because obviously you're growing and you're getting older, and in each kind of level of your growth, you're seeing different things, and that's what's also expanding your mind
Right.
and the foundation of your beliefs.
Right.
So let me ask you. I mean, knowing that you were fighting for the equality, racial injustice, and now you're thinking about it on a more worldly level,
Right.
and how it impacts us here, as Americans. Did you still find that there was an answer? You know what I mean? Like just one answer, or
No.
you were constant?
Always thinking, and understanding that we're dealing with, the capitalist system is an economic and social system which it just permeates everything in society. And so if we're talking about what's going on in the schools, or we're talking about what's going on in churches and synagogues and mosques, if we're talking about what's going on in government levels, what's going on in the military and how it's being used, what's going on in the police and the militarization of the police, what is that all about? It all comes from the same basic roots.
Right.
And those roots are in the capitalist system.
Right.
Those roots are in the private property and the private accumulation of social labor.
Yeah.
It's the whole working class that makes things.
Right.
It's the capitalists that take it and then give back to the workers some little bit that they need
Yeah.
to keep
to
going.
survive. Yeah.
And then that's the fight.
Right.
What is the living standard? What's due to working people
Right.
for all of what they've created? And then if you think about, well, what's the force that has to be brought to turn things around
Right.
and to redistribute the power in society, now we have to deal with race, and we have to deal with gender, and we have to deal with ethnicity, and how do
So
all
many
those things interact?
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with race, you also have to understand that there's class divisions
Right.
there too.
Right.
Whether we're talking about in the African American community or in the Hispanic community or in the white community, all these class differences operate.
So how do we begin then, to sort of infiltrate each one?
Well, that's what, everybody has to do it where they are.
Okay, so that's what we're looking, and you've been looking to do for generations.
Well-
in these different generations of your fight,
Yeah.
what progress have you seen in that movement, in infiltrating it?
Well, it's complicated, and you make progress, and then there's resistance.
Yeah.
The ruling class of this country is very powerful,
True.
and they don't take defeat easily.
No.
And they try to claw back everything that they've had to give up. So we're living through a period now over the last 40, 50 years in which the people who run the show, the captains of industry and finance, the ruling class, the capitalist class, the people who really run the show
Right.
have managed a major counteroffensive to undo the gains that were made by the trade union movement, by the Black freedom movement, by the women's movement, by the Chicana movement, by the Native American movement. All these different movements
little
have been pushed back, and too many of us are in our own little silos in that.
That's right.
And we have to figure out how to get out of those silos without forgetting the particularities, also understanding the commonness of our struggle.
Well, you've written some
And
very
that's-
profound books, my friend. So you do have an idea to a certain degree
Yeah.
on where that begins. And I mean, I know there's these principalities that be, but they're a very small fraction compared to the real people, the everyday people, to me. So in your perspective, or your thoughts on it, if you could,
Right.
what do we have to do as the masses, to me?
Yeah.
To ensure that we can continue to make those progressions, those
Well,
changes.
see, I think that there is a connection between ideas and practical work,
Okay.
the theory and practice, if you will.
Right.
There is a relationship between those things.
Okay.
So if we're talking about how do we confront white supremacy among so-called white people, and I'll say so-called because that's just what it is.
Yeah.
So now we have this problem of getting people to understand something that they have never been trained to think about.
Right.
Now, the only way that I think that can be done is in the course of actual practical struggle.
Right.
If you're involved in a fight for a wage increase, black and white workers have to be together, and if you're split apart, you lose that.
Yeah.
If you're in a fight for affordable housing, which God knows on Long Island, we're in a fight for affordable housing. It doesn't matter if you're black or white.
That's right. We all are.
We all are in that struggle.
Yes.
If we're not united in that struggle, we're going to lose.
Yeah. Very
If
much
we're
so.
united, we might lose, but at least we could win.
Yes.
So now, if you're in a white community that's dealing and everybody's saying, how can I get my kids out of the basement? The answer is have an affordable housing program that unites white and black and Hispanic and everybody else.
Yeah.
And for people who can't do that, white people who don't want to do it, black people who don't trust white people, who don't want to be in the same room with any white guy.
Right.
And that's going on too.
Right.
So we need to figure out how we get those people in a room for common struggle.
Right.
Because you're not going to get them in a room just because it's a good idea to be in that room.
Thank you. And that's the question and the problem as well. If it doesn't affect me personally, or if I don't like the next guy, even though it bothers me, I'm not going to get involved. What is the language that we have to use, or how, deep and low do we have to go in order to make it a priority for everyone? And no matter what your color, your background, the neighborhood that you live in, we all are concerned about the same things. How do you change the language?
Well, that's what we have to find out how to do.
That's what you're working on?
That's what we're working on.
All right.
And that's the task.
Yeah.
And that's the task if we're talking about the labor movement. It's the task if we're talking about environmental movements. It's the task in every movement, in the Black Freedom Movement too.
Right.
Where there are class divisions in all of those environments and all of those sort of aspects of life.
Right.
And the key thing to me is to understand the underlying source of all of this degradation is the drive for profit.
Yeah.
The drive for private profit built on the labor of working people of all colors
Right.
and all nationalities.
Right. Right.
And that class distinction is something that I think is what needs to be brought to the fore without losing the racial and gender realities
Right.
that there continues to be racial oppression in this country. There continues to be gender oppression.
Systematic, yes. So that's the next question, considering that it still exists and it's existed for so long, but I feel like the fight is louder, but yet it's falling on deaf ears. What is that going to take? I mean, I know we have, new generations of kids that are taking up, this mantle and that are speaking their mind and that are using the tools in front of them and even, the information and education that people like you have given them. But what is it going to take outside of, that noise that we're just spreading or shouting?
Well, I don't know.
I don't know.
You never know.
You never know.
All you have to do is just keep at it
Yeah.
and keep building those movements.
Right.
And to me, again, the key is that relationship between theory and practice,
Right.
between study and actually doing things.
Right.
And that's why I wrote this book, this Class, Race, and Gender,
Yes.
challenging the injuries and divisions of capitalism.
Well, let's talk about that real quick.
Okay.
Challenging the injuries and divisions of capitalism. What does that mean exactly? And also, tell us what progressive politics is as well.
Well, to me, progressive politics is what's progress. And as you said at the beginning of this discussion today, progress is anything that diminishes suffering.
Right.
Progress is anything that improves the material circumstances, the intellectual circumstances, and the organizational capacity of working people.
Right.
That's all progress. Anything that interferes with that is regression.
Yes.
And so when I say challenging the injuries and divisions of capitalism, the injuries are everywhere,
Very much so.
right? In everybody's lives who work and who are trying to get by. And the divisions are there too, racial divisions, divisions of gender.
Even if we're in the same fight, we still have a division.
Still have those divisions.
Yeah.
And we have to learn how to come together.
Right.
Without saying, well, we're all the same. Because
Right.
we're not all the same.
Well,
And to respect those differences, to respect the requirements of these different movements, at the same time as understanding their common core, that's what we have to do. And this book is designed to give people an orientation of how to think about that concretely. What are the material realities of capitalist society
Right.
that lead to these things?
Right.
All of them.
Right.
And so we can see whether we're in the environmental movement or working, like this environmental march that just happened yesterday, I guess,
Yes,
or 2
yes,
days
yes.
ago. That was wonderful that I was at.
Oh, nice.
Oh, yeah. It's a
Great.
place to be.
Sorry, I missed it.
In the street.
Oh my God! Yeah, no,
Oh,
it
get
is.
in
That
the
was, it was amazing. I'm sure. Tell us a little about that.
Well, it was thousands and thousands of people.
Wow.
All different kind of people. So many people with handmade signs. It was a real people's thing. It wasn't just fabricated some, thing that somebody printed up a whole bunch of signs and gave
Right.
them out to people. This was people really there.
Right.
And it was quite an impressive and a wonderful place to be.
That's wonderful.
People from all parts of the Northeast who were here in New York, in New York City. And the energy was very good.
Wow.
People singing and people banging on drums and people, carrying
And
on.
everyone was peaceful.
Everybody was peaceful.
I love
Everybody
that.
was happy and joyous to be there with everybody else.
That's wonderful.
And that's the context in which we learn from each other.
Yeah.
And in which we can be together. And if you're not in a street or if you're not in a picket line, or if you're not engaged, you miss out on all that. And then everything becomes just it's an idea.
Yeah.
And ideas are not strong enough to defeat other ideas outside of the practical work of building a life.
So you agree that it is important for us to get involved in something,
Definitely.
some issue,
Definitely.
some topic, some cause, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, that's important to you as well as your children and the next generation.
Absolutely.
So you've been in that fight, and do you have children?
I do.
You do. So you've been, obviously, your parents teaching you, now you're teaching your children, and
Yep.
your children teaching your grandchildren type
Let's
of thing.
hope.
So in these lessons that you're passing on, and the knowledge that you're giving them,
Right.
Are you continuing to have that hope? Because it's going to get to the point where everyone has to see, because you're part of the Poor People's Campaign as
That's
well,
right.
that I really feel that it's a moral
Well,
thing. You know?
It's the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival.
Yes, revival, exactly.
And
that's where I feel like the
That's
foundation.
Right. And in that book, that class, race, and gender book, there's a whole bunch of material about liberation theology, about ethics and norms that govern behavior. And it turns out that ethics and norms are not forever. They have a class stamp. The capitalist class has a stamp of its own
Right.
about individualism
Right.
and which turns into a dysfunctional society of me, myself, and I,
Exactly.
as opposed to, well, you have to take care of yourself, but in order to serve other people.
Yeah,
It's not just me, myself, and I serve myself, end of story.
exactly.
Right? It's like when you get on an airplane and the mask comes down, you put it on
yourself first. Exactly.
yourself first in order to take care of the person next to you.
Thank you.
Not self first, and then you
And
look
then
at
look
the person
around
next door and
and
say,
figure
what's the
out-
matter with you?
Thank you.
Was you only got one arm?
Yes.
You can't put that mask on?
Thank you.
Get yourself together, sonny.
Exactly.
No, that's not the idea.
And you know what's amazing to me, and it's so funny, and I mentioned that earlier too, like if it doesn't affect you, if it's not needed of you, from you, you're not worried about it. But in those situations, like when I find, when we have these unfortunate storms and, these beautiful homes are destroyed and, their millions of dollars is now taken away from them. But if it happens in like the minority areas, or if it happens in, underserved neighborhoods, it doesn't bother them. Let them figure it out.
Right.
They'll get the help that they
Right.
need. But when it happens to the upper class, then it's, where is the people to help us? Why aren't
That's
why
right.
aren't these
That's
people
right.
here? So I want to understand in that, how do we make everyone realize that it really is a moral thing, no matter how much money you have in your pocket. You might need that same need one day.
Well, along those lines, in Roman Catholic theology, when it came out of the Vatican Council II in the 1960s,
Right.
there was this idea of the preferential option for the poor,
Right.
that the church should dedicate itself to serving the poor. And it was formulated as a preferential option. We opt to prefer the poor. We don't have to, but
we
that's an
prefer.
option,
Okay.
right? Now, for the poor, there's no option.
Right. They have no option. We're poor.
And we're going to fight for ourselves.
Yes.
So this idea of among the more privileged, there is this idea of noblesse oblige, or it's an option, and okay, we'll look after
into
you.
it. Yeah.
But that's not good enough. As the labor song goes, we want no condescending saviors. It's up to the people themselves.
Yeah.
And to take the narration and change it by changing the narrator.
Right.
And
Right.
getting the voice of the people themselves up forward.
Yes.
Instead of having some NGO come in and talk, or some church leader come in and talk.
Right.
From their option for the poor.
And their agenda for,
That's right.
Yeah.
Now let's get the people themselves engaged.
Right.
And that's what the Poor People's Campaign tries to do.
Right.
That's what the labor movement does.
Right.
That's what a lot of the Black freedom movement does.
Right.
It's down in the trenches with the people.
Right. Right.
And if you're not there, you're not there.
Yeah. Well, obviously, you're letting me know that now. I might have to follow you with the people, my friend.
Well, come on along.
I'm so serious. So is there any one particular cause that's really near and dear to your heart, or you feel is the most important that will kind of help the other issues, social,
Yeah.
economic, cultural, kind of
Yeah, well, I don't want to
progress?
say that there's one that's more important than the other, but I do believe, and I come out of the labor movement
Okay.
myself, what I do believe is that at the core of this problem, whether it's environment, race, standard of living, whatever it is capitalism.
Yeah.
Is this class of people who are running the society for most people into the ground and for themselves into the stratosphere, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're living with. That's what we see.
Yeah.
And it's a conscious, deliberate strategy on their part. And they know what they're doing and they're good at it.
Yeah.
So we have to be good at it too, to come after them. Now, to me, the central force that comes after capital is labor.
Yes.
If you don't have the labor,
You're
what
not
have you
going to
got?
make any money. Yeah, no profit, no money, no
Now,
capital.
the thing is that among other things, what we have to understand about labor is there is no such thing as the white working class. There are white people in the working class. But too often, when we talk about the working class in this country, we think of it, or in the media, the pundits will think of it as white people. But if there's a black worker, it's not a worker, he's a black person.
That's interesting.
If it's a woman
It's a
who's
woman.
working,
Yeah.
that's a woman, not a worker.
working. Right.
Right? If it's a white man who's a worker, that's a worker. Right? Now, we got to come past that,
Right.
because that working class is a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-gendered, not just men and women, but
Right.
now we're talking about transgender, we're talking about
Everyone.
gay,
Exactly,
everybody.
everyone.
If you work for a living in that way where you don't have much control over your work, you're just, yes, boss, and you do it.
Well, do they sort of break it up in that kind of category because of maybe the income level or the...
Yeah, no, see, class is not a question
No,
of
it's
income,
not?
it's a question
Okay.
of power.
Oh, okay, okay.
Class is a question of power.
Right.
And so what you've got is a working class that is basically going to work and doing the job that they're told is the job.
Right. No
Right?
matter what their color,
Whatever it
race,
is,
color-
that's right.
Okay.
That's right. They don't have a whole lot of control over the pace of the content of the work. You know, it's the job, and
Right.
the supervisor tells them. That's about 62% of the population. So this is a working class society. That's why one of my books is The Working Class Majority.
Right.
Is to show that that is what this country is.
Yeah.
And it's not just white people. Actually, white men are by far the minority of the working class in this country.
Really? They're not working? Yeah,
No,
you're right. No,
the
they're not.
White men are in the working class.
They are,
Oh yeah.
but you said they're the minority.
they are not. They are the minority of the class as a whole.
Okay, yes. Mhm.
Right? Because the class as a whole is all the women, whether they're white or anybody else,
Right.
plus black men, plus, so on and so
okay.
forth. So that white men, who we
It's
normally
now
think
minimized.
of,
Yeah.
oh, that's the working class. That's not right.
Right.
So we need to, first of all, in getting to where's the power, where is the strength, the capacity to challenge capital, it is grounded in the working class.
It's grounded in, and we comprise the working class. We are the working class that can stand up to those. Oh, okay,
Right.
I see.
But that working class has to also take on all the other outrages that capital presents, not just at work,
Right.
but in the environment, in racial justice issues, all across the board.
And that's where we
And
have a divide as well.
That's what we have to do.
Yeah.
That's what we have to figure out, and that's what this class, race, and gender book is trying to explain.
Well, that's-
How does that work?
That's what I was going to ask you. So, what do you want the readers to get out of this book? Has it been published yet?
It's just coming out next month in October 2023.
Oh, nice.
From PM Press. If people go to pmpress.org, you can order the book.
That is perfect.
Yep.
So, what do you want us to get out of this read?
A, how things work. B, you can do something about it. And C, if you really want to understand it, get in gear and get to work.
Yeah.
because
Yes.
it's in the course of action, it's in the course of practice, it's in the course of doing things
Yeah.
that you learn,
Yeah.
if you're open to learning.
Yes.
See, that's the key. You got to be open to learning.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely
So
right.
I really am a big fan of teaching. I taught for 50 years in a classroom,
Wow.
and I taught because I don't like ignorance.
Well, what was the subject? What were you
I
a
taught
professor
economics.
in? Economics.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, how important is it, that we share this information with our youth today?
It's essential.
And get them involved
It's
as
essential.
well. It's essential.
Well, see, a lot of young people are involved. They're active. They're out on the street. They're doing all these things. They're organizing at Starbucks. They're carrying Black Lives Matters banners. They're doing Me Too things. All of
True.
this stuff is going on all over the country. They're doing things.
Right.
The question is, do they understand? And can they take that activity and translate it into knowledge?
Yes.
That would then shape their activity in a different way as they grow.
Right.
Which is how we all do. That's what we were talking about before.
Thank you.
Through what I was doing, I was learning, and then learning helped me to do it differently.
Right.
On and on, like walking on two legs. You do, and then you learn, and you'll do some more. Right?
Well, you see that now, right? I mean, I'm sure
absolutely.
that you can see a better way, for these kids to fight for these issues.
Well, I can see somewhat better, but
Okay.
it's their life.
Yeah.
And it's their reality, and they understand that in a way that I don't.
Right, right.
So it's just an intergenerational discussion.
Right.
And that's what I mean, this book, this Class, Race, and Gender book, is my contribution, if you will, to that conversation.
That's great.
So I want young people who are activists, who are organizers in all these different movements, I'd like them to take a look at this, read it, and then let's talk about it.
Yeah. I love
So
it.
I have a book tour now coming up that I'm putting
Okay.
together around the country in different places. And in every place, it's not just me talking.
Right.
I've got people from all these different movements, the environmental movement, Black freedom movement, labor movement, all kinds of places, women's movement, coming into those book talks so that we're in conversation,
Right.
which would then open into the audience.
Yes.
Rather than just me talking, let's have a conversation with the people who are young and doing it.
Yes.
And so that, again, is what I'm trying to do, is to have that conversation.
Yes.
Not that I know everything,
Of
but I know
course.
something.
Yeah.
And here's what I think I know and what I think is important to have as points of orientation, like what we've been talking about today, the importance of class, its relationship to race and gender, and how does that work? Why is there a militarism and imperialism? What is that all about?
Yeah.
But with no jargon.
Right.
Let's not have jargon.
Right.
Let's just talk.
Let's just talk. That's what I love, though. That is, it's debates, ideas being bounced off one another, and the information and education that you've learned and you've gained along the way.
Right.
And that kind of strengthens your viewpoint and strengthens your idea of how you're going to change and continue in the fight.
Exactly.
So I love that, and I love that, you're ever changing and ever growing, even as a young kid, from what you saw to what you're seeing now. What are your hopes for the future? Do you have an idea? Time is winding down. Do you have an idea of, what you expect to see within the next, 10, 15 years?
You can't know that.
You can't. What are your
All
hopes?
you can do is you can just get into the struggle and keep going and try to assess the situation and mobilize the best you can at who the real enemy is.
Yes.
Right? And not be fighting among ourselves,
All the time.
but figure out, okay, that's the class we have to challenge.
Yes.
We call it the billionaire class, you call it the ruling class, call it the capitalist class, but those are the people who are running the show. And it's not the auto worker who's going to a Trump rally
Exactly.
in Detroit
Right.
who's the enemy here.
Right. That's right.
Who's making this. It's Trump and the people who are around him who are making it.
Yep. Exactly.
And so let's keep track of who's who and what's what.
Yeah.
And I guess I would have to say, what's my hope is that in that period that's coming, we'll get better at keeping track of who's who and what's what.
Yes.
And who is the real problem.
Yes.
And how do we mobilize the largest number of forces to get at that main problem, which is what this Class, Race, and Gender book is designed to do.
Well, I love that. I thank you so much for being here, educating me. I hope you guys get this book. Please, I want to put up your information. Thank you, Mr. Zweig, for being here so much.
It's a pleasure.
I want you to just leave us with something. Tell us what we should know, look out for, whatever is on your heart.
Buy this book.
I love it. That's right. It's going to help a lot of people. And I'm hoping, no, seriously, that we all become part of, what that book is hoping to engage us.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
wanting more, expecting more, not only from the system, but from ourselves as well. You know what I mean?
It's up to us.
Exactly. It's up to us. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been a great little conversation. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you. I would like to get real quick to the Dare to Be You. And the Dare to Be You is, justice begins with our awareness of the present moment and shows up in the love we bring to our interactions with others and our responses to the social challenges of our time. And that's basically what you spoke to
That's
today.
what we're talking about.
That's exactly what we're talking about. This man wants you to become part of the change. Get out there in the street.
Get there.
That's what Mr. Zweig said. Get out there, become part of something, whatever it is that is close to your heart, that you know is going to affect your family, your children, the next generation. Become part of it. Join the conversation. Be not a spectator, but a contributor to the change that you're seeking in this world, because it's been going on for a long time that we need it. And sometime soon, I'm hoping our children or our children's children will be able to benefit from all the hard work that we've put in and all the hard work that we've been thinking about for so many years.
Yeah, well, it's action and learning.
That's right.
Study and do.
That's right. Study and do. So I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Our Unity. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Zweig, for being here.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank
I
you.
want you all to tune in next week to another episode. And remember that peace and love is in the palm of our hands. So let's go out there and be some love, give some love, support some love. I will see you next week. Remember, I love you, and you have a good night. Say good night, Mr. Zweig. See you later.
Strong Island Entertainment.